Okay, well, welcome to this quick 1 hour webinar about Trustee Annual Report. I'm Steve Place. I'm the senior advisor, so I do, some of you I know, I do most of the one-to-one advice and support to frontline groups in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. My background is that I've worked in the voluntary community or with the voluntary community sector all my working life, so over 40 years. I've been a trustee most of my life as well as either working in the sector or supporting and advising it. But I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just someone who's sort of got 40 years experience of working alongside the sector and hope to share that knowledge and advice with you. Most of you are members of Community Action Network CAN, so we're funded to give free advice and support to frontline groups in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, but also in Dorset Council area as well. We're an independent charity which has a membership, and as I said, most of you are members as well. These are my contact details, so actually, you know, if you've got any questions after today or anything you want clarified, then quite happy for you to contact me. Use my email address or the mobile phone. The landline goes to the office and you'll just be able to leave a message there rather than get hold of me direct, but quite happy for you to contact me on my work mobile number. So in this quick hour, I'm going to do a quick overview of Trustee Annual Reports, about why I produce them, how it can help you, what it should contain legally, but also maybe in terms of good practice, maybe how to jazz it up a bit, and then there'll be about 15 minutes at the end for some questions and answers. So as we go along, basically, you know, if you've got a question or query, either make a note of it, or if you're happy and confident, you can always put it in the chat box function of Zoom. And as I said, after today, you'll be sent a copy of these slides and a copy to the recording of this. Okay, so it's that time of year again, having to do your annual report. Most of you are probably use the end of March of year end. Not all of you, but quite a lot. Most organizations do. So actually it feels, oh my God, what are we going to have to do about it? But okay, first question is, why produce one? This is audience participation. So just you know, unmute yourself and just call out why do you feel you have to produce a trustee annual report?
So it gives
Okay. The two of you tried and then both stopped. Just one of you do it.
So it's a good advertisement, really, of how your organisation's going, especially for potential funders to have a look at, see what you're doing.
Okay, promotion. Anyone else got a reason about why you got to do one or should do one?
Accountability, like to show that you're doing the right things. And
okay, yep. Anyone else got a reason?
It's a legal requirement.
A legal requirement. Okay, right. You got most of them there, so that's fine. So here we go. So there are some musts. So constitutionally, so your governing document, it might be articles of association, or it could be a constitution, might even say that you have to produce an annual report. Some of you might even have the thing where it's got to be produced within, you know, so many months of year end, or whatever. Or it might be implied that you produce one. So it might say, for instance, that every year you've got to run an AGM, and at that AGM, you have to produce an annual report and accounts. And there is obviously a legal requirement. So if you're a company, all companies have to produce an annual report, directors' report at the end of the year. And then charities, all charities have to produce an annual trustees annual report. Even if they don't have to send it to the Charity Commission, if you're a very small charity, you might not have to send it to the Charity Commission, but you're still required to produce a trustees annual report and to make it available to a member of the public if you are asked to do so. And it's a criminal offence if you don't do so. And then there are various stakeholders who might require it to do you. So for instance, some funders, one of their conditions of funding you is that they want to see your annual report once a year. You might promise it to give to supporters as well. So those may be the musts. I guess one view is that, you know, annual reports are a smokescreen. Basically to hide your bad practice, or perhaps maybe because you see it's commercially sensitive. But we've got other reasons for doing it. So you exist to make a difference, not money. And that's what's very different about us and the private sector. Really, very crudely, private business is there to increase shareholder value, to make money for its owners. Whereas we in the not-for-profit making sector, and particularly charities, exist to make a difference. That's what we're measured on, and that's what we're required to do. So that we've got some wants. So there's a bit about promotion. It's the chance to document the difference that you've made, and actually you can sometimes find it's even very good as an internal document. Sometimes when you ask people within your organization, maybe other trustees, staff, volunteers, supporters, very active supporters, you actually ask them, well, you know, what do we do, and what difference does it make? You sometimes find that not everyone knows everything your organization does. You know, they know their own little bit, and that's what they're really passionate about, and they know in detail, but they don't know what Jill or Joe are doing on the other side of the organization. So it can be a good way of actually sharing that information within your organization. But as Simone says, it can be used as a good promotional tool to get supporters, either grant funders, or maybe even individual donors as well. But there's the other thing that we want to show that we are different from the private sector. And that we are making a difference. And so open and transparency should be a value that we hold. And it's also that many funders, particularly donors, individual donors, are more and more asking the question, I want to know my money is going to make a difference. And therefore they want to see evidence of that. And one place that actually, you know, they could look in would be like a trustees annual report, where it's very clear, you know, that actually how you've used the money and what difference it has made. The Charity Commission a couple of times has done some sort of research into the value of trustees annual reports, and we'll talk about this a bit later on. But one of the requirements that charity law has, and Charity Commission has, is for the trustees annual report to report on public benefit, the difference that it's made to the public. And they've looked at obviously how it will be in the trustees annual report and the accounts. And what they found is that it's helped charities to stay focused on what they were there to achieve, their purposes, and when planning activities. So it's a time once a year when you can suddenly think, well, actually, what are we about? What's our raison d'etre? What are we trying to do? And how have we achieved that in the past 12 months? And sometimes that can help you then think about planning forward. It's obviously a place where you can talk about the value of your work and the difference that it's making, as I said, for a variety of readers. And it's also demonstrating the charity's transparency and accountability. I can't remember, but somebody did suggest that accountability is another reason for doing these reports. And certainly the Charity Commission has that strong feeling that charities need to be accountable to the wider public. not just their trustees and not just their supporters or their members, but also to the wider public. And if nothing else, because of the tax breaks that we all get as charities. But also they found it improves the overall quality of reporting on their work, including talking about impact. Is very often we as charities, have got lots of facts and figures about bums on seats, the number of people that have attended our meetings, the number of people that we've counselled, the number of hectares of land that have been improved, the number of, cans that we've recycled. But actually, it's the difference that it makes. You need to move on from sort of like the numbers to the difference that's being made. I guess there are some common misconceptions about Trustees' Annual Report. Obvious one is that no one reads the reports and the accounts. You might think that, but it's interesting that the Charity Commission thinks that, basically has said recently that they get 14 million views of the register of charities, and 1 million of those are people looking at charity finance details and downloading of individual accounts and annual reports. So someone's looking at them because they're downloading them off the Charity Commission website. To be honest, quite a lot of them might be funders, because actually quite a lot of funders, they don't ask you for your Trustees' Annual Account and Report when you do the application. They will probably look at it online and they will look at them to see whether there's any reasons for them to be worried about you. And I'll give you an example a bit later on this morning. And actually the Charity Commission itself actually looks at 1,000 charities each year. They basically sort of sample about 1,000 charities each year to look at their Trustees' Annual Report and accounts. And they will probably flag up if they think there are weaknesses or problems or issues in it. I guess the other feeling is that probably, okay, we've got to do this and we've got to send them, most of us have to send them off to the Charity Commission. But actually, as I said, anybody has the legal right to see them, and increasingly, I've said earlier, individual donors do want to know that their money is being used to make a difference, and therefore increasing public confidence by having Trustees' Annual Reports that are easily accessible, easily readable and digestible is probably an important concern for most charities going forward. I guess the other thing might be said that they're no use to anywhere except to they're no use to the charity itself. But I've already talked about that actually it can be a good tool to explain across your organisation what the whole charity is doing. You obviously might use it at the AGM and make them widely available as possible to existing and potential supporters. I guess the other thing is that they're boring. Well, that's down to you. Although there are certain things that have got to be in it, how you present it and how you do it is totally up to you. So if they're boring, it's your fault. Okay. So if you want to make them unboring, it's a thing for you to think about and to do. Okay, so that's about why. So this next section is actually what to think about should be in a Trustees' Annual Report. Now, as charities, actually, when you talk about accounts or reports, there are always two different documents. You've got your annual accounts, which are all figure work, and for the private sector, that's usually the one and only important document. They just want to know the bottom line. Have we made a profit or a loss? But actually, as charities, the second document, the Trustees' Annual Report, which talks about actually how you've used that money to make a difference, is just as important. So when actually, like funders or whatever are asking for your annual accounts or your report, they will actually tend to want to see both of them together. Yeah. So sometimes people do create a single document with them, so that makes it easy. But if you've got both, then when you're asked for them, you really should give both documents together. Okay. So 2 documents really. So as I said, they complement each other. They talk about the Trustee's Annual Report gives you a bit of text about how you raised the money and what you spent them on and the difference that it's made. And as I said, it should be engaging and digestible content, explaining your activities. And if nothing else, that's probably the most important thing to concentrate on getting right, is explaining the difference that has been made. There are other things that have got to go in it, but mostly they're administrative, detailed stuff, just information. Whereas spending time and effort on getting across the story, a good story about actually the difference your work makes, is probably the most important thing to do in a trustee's annual report. And about said the difference impact you made. But in terms of open and transparency, it should be a balanced review of your performance. So actually not only always puffing up the great work you've done, but maybe also showing where things haven't worked so well and how you're going to learn from doing that. And actually, again, people might think, oh, promotional stuff, we just want to promote the good things. But actually funders, a lot of funders are looking for that, where they can see that actually organizations are learning from things that haven't worked so well and even failures. I know it can be very brave to do, but at least think about putting in stuff about where things haven't gone so well and what you're going to do about it. One thing that is expected in Trustees Annual Report is a bit of text around the figure work. You know, like I said, the annual accounts will be lots of numbers in tables, and to most readers will just glaze over at it. So you need a bit of a section in it that talks about your finances. You know, was it a good year financially and why? If not, why not? What you're going to do about it, and then some probably highlights about end of year stuff. You know, what was your balance? Was that better or worse than last year? If you've got more money than you need, what you're going to do about it. And that's where you need to talk about reserves policy. And if that's one thing you need to take away from today, is your Trustees Annual Report needs to talk about reserves and in the way that the Charity Commission expects. Now, reserves policy is another whole topic. I am thinking that we'll put on a webinar about, you know, how to do reserves policy. And the reason why it's complicated is it needs to be individual to each charity and its circumstances. But all charities are expected to have a well-articulated reserves policy and to report on your target and what your actual is at the end of each year. And that goes into the Trustees Annual Report. Details, figures, notes to clearly explain them, particularly anything unusual. That's more related to the annual accounts, the figure work. And then there are some things that have got to be there by law, and that's by the charity SORP. There is a link at the end of the slides here to the charity SORP. Very long document, but it is segmented. So there is a section just about what needs to be in a Trustees Annual Report. And actually there is also a link to a very good checklist done by a set of national accountants about what should be in the Trustees Annual Report, but also the accounts. So I'll point that out to you at the end of the slides. Sometimes I'm asked, well, actually, how detailed, how big does it need to be? Well, it could be 6 pages, it could be 30 pages. It's going to depend on how complicated a charity you are and what you do. But basically, it's just basically got to give us a story that includes all that explains what your charity's aims are and how well you've been in the last year in achieving it, has all the legal requirements and a balanced view of your structure aims, and this is really good from the Charity Commission. Most often we think of the Charity Commission as being quite a boring organization, but like here it says it's your chance to bring the charity to life. And as they say here, that can then also help you bring in donors. So there is no right or wrong. It needs to be right for you. And I'm going to give you some sort of checklists at the end to basically think about whether yours is fit for purpose or not. So what must the trustees annual report include according to the charity SORP? So it's got to have sections around your charity objects and the activities it does. And that links to that then is about your achievements and performance. So that's, you know, that might be numbers, but also it would also be about the difference, the impact that the work has made. And that's the place where you're going to talk about maybe lessons learned, for instance, and what you might be doing differently next year. Then there needs to be a section, as I said, a financial review, a bit of a summary of how the year's gone financially. Whether you're going concern or not, that means whether you think, the trustees think, sorry, whether the trustees believe that in 12 months' time, you're still going to be solvent. If your trustees are worried by that, they need to say that in the trustees annual report. And as I said, there needs to be a statement about your reserves. If you're a large charity and that means your gross income is more than $500,000, I probably don't think any of you fit into that, into that bracket. But if you were a large charity, you need to then add some fundraising statements, and the SORP and the CROW checklist that I'll give you reference to, links to later on, actually tells you what those things are. And similarly, large have to also put in the key risks and uncertainties. Although I have to say, I think, you know, for all of you, it might be quite good for you also to put any key risks and uncertainties in. You don't have to, but I think more and more smaller charities are putting in maybe some key risks and uncertainties. Again, it shows a reader that you're a responsible charity. You are thinking about things that might not be so certain in the year ahead and what you might be doing about that. Some plans for the future periods. It could be a couple of bullet points. It could be a page long stuff, totally up to you. Again, it shows that you're thinking ahead, you're planning ahead. And that might be related to some of your learning about what went well and what not so well in the previous 12 months. And then there's a lot of administrative stuff that you need to put in. Now, very often when you look at the templates that go out, these last two bullets are usually put first, but actually they're the boring bits, you know, where your address is, the names of your trustees and when they were appointed and when they stepped down, what your address is, who your bankers might be, any of your advisors, what sort of legal document you have as a governing document. All that can go at the back end. You know, you want to start right at the top with the good story, you know, what your charity is about, what difference it's trying to make, and then over the last 12 months, what you've done to try and achieve those charitable objects and how well you did it. That story, good story, should be right at the front, and then all the admin bits can go right at the back end. I have to say, even actually, this year, we changed ours around. For many years we did that. We had all that boring administrative stuff at the beginning and then the story stuff afterwards, but actually the last couple of years we've swapped it around and I think it looks a lot better. I think one of the things that would be useful for you to do when you're sitting down scripting this is to think who might read it. So I've nicked this from somebody else, but this is the sort of list of potential readers and the sorts of questions they might have. And therefore, if you have that in the back of your brain, then that might help you draft the text. You know, like if you're a funder, does what they do meet my criteria? Will they meet my impact requirements? How will my money be spent? Volunteers, am I being made use of? Is it a good use of my time? You know, if the story they get about the charity being well run and making a lot of impact, then they'll feel happier about staying on, giving their time for nothing. Media is quite good because actually media are usually looking for a story, more often bad. You know, they're looking for where they can throw mud, not necessarily where they can give you a star for doing something good. So think about maybe the media and what they might be reading. But, I think that's a useful checklist for you to look at and think about in terms of your readership. I think there's some other interesting things is that maybe you might want to have different sorts of reports for different readers. If you've got multiple different audiences, maybe you and it'd be too difficult to emphasize the things those readers are looking for in one document. It becomes too unwieldy, too complicated, doesn't read well, doesn't flow well. You might want to have different ones for different audiences. So you might have your official Trustees Annual Report, but then you might have mini reports aimed at different audiences. I know it's a lot more work, but you might think it might pay off in the end. And the other thing is always think about, is it a good story? That is the most important thing to get across to people. Maybe think about adding some graphics, to try and jazz it up and liven it up. Some people love text. Some people, go to sleep after 2 seconds, whereas they love a little simple graphic. Photos as well of some of your work, sometimes can tell 1,000 words. And then when you're thinking about impact, I like this phrase, no names without numbers and no numbers without names. Particularly for a lot of our work that we do, it's quite difficult to show the difference and the impact in figures, but actually having like a mini story, case study for want of a better term, might actually give that across better than a table of figures that you've worked with. So somebody's human story and about the difference that it's made. And you also might think about facts at a glance. People know about lots of organizations use things like infographics. If you don't know Canva does some really good, creates quite good infographics really, really quickly. So it gives you a sort of key facts on a single page, as well as talking about failures. And I've talked about this as well. Think about including those in your Trustees Annual Report. As I said, we're not just about the bums on seats, number of customers, number of users, like a lot of private sector will use as a key metric about them. So it's not just about the numbers of people that are using us, but it's also going to be the difference that it made. So a meteorite hitting the Earth, did it just create a nice pretty light in the sky, or did it end up with the extinction of the dinosaurs? Two very different types of impact. So think about the impact as well as the numbers. So there's a few examples here. Taking this from a local charity, RNLI, but I know a completely different league from all of us. Their turnover is about 400 million a year. But there's a nice infographic, and as I said, something like Canva could quite easily pull them together, and charities can get a free license for Canva. Graphics. And this is hours off of the Charity Commission website. So if you haven't looked at your pages on the Register of Charities, they use some simple graphics, so you could even nick them. You don't have to create them yourself. But if you've got someone who knows how to use Excel, then Excel can quite quickly turn some numbers into interesting different types of graphics. This is a simple pie chart, but Excel does all sorts of whizzy things if you want to do it. So this is CAN's income and expenditure and broken down and so on. And then I've talked about stories. So this is from Moordown Community Centre. So they've just done an impact report, and one of the things they talked about was the benefit for their volunteers of volunteering. So they did a survey, so you've got some quotes there, and then you've got Anita's story about what she gets out of volunteering at Moordown Community Centre. Okay, so who puts it together? I suppose typically you start off with a single person, and that could be like the chair, a manager, CEO, you know, sort of your primary employee. In a way that helps, because then at least you've got a single storyteller, rather than sort of like trying to stitch together lots of contributions. But you do need to include other people, you know, staff and volunteers and trustees in the content of that. So it just isn't one person's view, but at least your single person is like the editor, who might then actually stitch it all together so that it reads well and is a single story. If you've got the chance, you know, you want it to be accessible to people who don't know much about your organization, is then try and get someone to read it who doesn't really know your charity very well, and see whether actually it makes sense and they understand and that it's giving a good story. And the other thing is that, you know, it does need to be signed off by your board of trustees. So even if it is written by a single person, it does need to go to them. And I have been on enough charity boards where, you know, it comes up on the agenda and it's rubber stamped. And I probably don't believe that every single trustee has read it. So I think I would try and find a way of trying to encourage trustees to read it, maybe prompt them with some questions, you know, send it well before obviously the meeting, prompt them to questions, and then try and get a discussion going, because at the end of the day it's their report. They agree, they approve it, and every single individual is saying, yep, I'm happy with this. This does represent what our charity has done in the last 12 months. So here's a few things to, you know, once you have written it, to maybe ask yourself, does it tell the reader what you've done, why you've done it? So that's about your charity objects, and maybe the story about why you are doing this work. You know, what's your urgent need that you are trying to meet? Is it saving the whales? Is it helping those with addictions? Is it saving, you know, historic artifacts and helping people to understand their historical context? Is it improving people's conditions of life and why that's important? Okay, so it's about getting across why you're doing it. What's the difference that you've made, and how have we spent your money? And obviously that's very important if you're relying on an awful lot of individual donors and grant funders. Some common pitfalls. Quite often, very small charities just send in a chairs report and it doesn't meet the Charity Commission's expectations. And they've said this on a number of occasions. Make sure it includes the charity objects somewhere. Okay, that is very important. So as well as talking about, you know, trying to put it into what people would understand, you also need to make sure it actually has your legal objects in it. And as I said, make sure it describes the difference, not just bums on seats and the number of things that you've done, but actually what difference that might have made. This statutory statement needs to appear somewhere in it. And quite often it's missing from quite a lot of trustee annual reports that I see. You could put it into your governance section, you know, talking about how often the trustees meet and what they do at those meetings and how they're run. Or you could put it into how you plan your activities. Something like this, some sort of statement like this, that you've actually taken, you've kept in mind the Charity Commission's guidance on public benefit. As I said, statement on reserves is another thing that quite often is missing from trustees' annual reports. The other thing is that quite often the figures in the trustees' annual report and the figures on the accounts sometimes don't match. Probably because maybe, you know, person who's working on the annual accounts, they've had to tweak one of the figures, but actually the old figure was given to the person writing the trustees' annual report, and that doesn't get updated. So just make sure that any figures in both. And to be honest, if any of you are having independent examiner, they're supposed to look at the trustees annual report to make sure that any figures in that actually match those in the in the accounts. And in the last year, I've worked with, I think, 3 organisations who have had an independent examination, and they don't. So I've said to the independent examiner, did you ask for the trustees annual report? Did they match? And they sort of gave me a mealy-mouthed answer. So I know they should be doing that work themselves, but I would just double check.
I have to say ours did, and it kept coming back with, can you check this out? Can you check that out? So ours did quite a thorough.
Yeah, some are very
but
good.
You're always a year behind, aren't you?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
your report I'm writing, or will be writing now, won't get to the accounts to be checked till next year. So
yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, is don't get your accountant to write it. Some people do, because actually that happens in the private sector. I have to say that they get their accountant who does the year end to write their very simple director's report with just basic stuff. But again, it could be wrong. Like, again, I've seen a charity this year that obviously picked up what they'd done for another charity, and they were talking about something completely different in terms of what the charity was doing. So it was completely inappropriate. And don't assume the regulator won't ask for it. As I said, you know, they do look at some by random, but they might actually ask for it, particularly, again, if someone makes some sort of complaint to the Charity Commission, they will ask for it. Now, there are deadlines you have to meet. So Companies House, if you're a charitable company, can't remember if any of you are, but if any of you are, you've got 9 months to file your trustees. They call it a director's report. If you're a charitable company, you have to do a joint, what's called trustees annual report and director's report. Basically, if you follow the rules for a trustees annual report, you will tick the boxes for a director's report. But you have to file them within 9 months of your year end, and you get fined if you are a minute late. And it goes up. So in the first month, it's 150 quid. Between 2 and 3 months, it's 375, 3 to 6, 750, and 6 months, it's 1,500. So, you know, the fine goes up quite quickly. And if you do it for 2 consecutive years, it gets doubled. Just to confuse you, if you're a charity, you've got 10 months to file your trustees annual report and accounts, and you're reg flagged if late. So no excuses are accepted by either regulator, to be honest. Charity Commission a couple of years ago did do some research, and they gave lots of examples of where they didn't accept excuses, some of which were totally silly. The back of my car flew open and all the accounts fell out on the motorway. To even our treasurer died and we couldn't get access to the paperwork is not acceptable excuse. They were saying that actually, you know, there should be contingency in place so that actually, you know, the accounts and so on, there should be a backup that other people can get hold of if, you know, a key person is missing. So that's a bit of a lesson to take away. So there's no so I said the Charity Commission doesn't fine, but you get red flagged. So if you go onto the register for this charity, Lower Central Gardens, Bournemouth, you look at the accounts and annual returns page, then it has the last 5 years there, and it tells you how late. Does anybody happen to know who the trustee of the Lower Central Gardens, Bournemouth is? BCP Council. So I just love this. So if you ever get told by BCP Council that, oh, you're not a well-run charity, you could say, okay. So, but this is important because this red flagging is that this, as I said, a lot of funders will look at this page, and The Charity Commission does say to anyone that you should check this, and it should concern a funder if a charity is late in filing its annual return or its annual accounts, because it should raise issues for you about how well they run a charity. They say this is a basic obligation of charities to do. And if they can't do this, then maybe there are other things that they're not doing properly. Okay, so try not to be red flag, because I said it'll be there for 5 years, you know. I think there are these key questions for you to take away, really. You know, think about what's the purpose of your annual report, so that will dictate maybe what will be in it, the layout. You know, if you're just aiming it for legal compliance, then probably text is as fine. Whereas if you want to use it as a very high profile promotion, you probably need to look at really jazzing it up. Think about then who your target audience is and what do you want your audience to do? You know, donate, fund, or better understand the problem you're addressing. Do you just have a single document, annual accounts and report, or do you have other documents like an annual review? Can we have our annual accounts and annual report, but we also have a sort of shorter summary, which we call our impact report? And think about then actually how will readers get hold of it? You know, hard copy, web, mobile. And I do say that actually it's a public document. If you filed it with the Charity Commission, it will be there. So actually probably put it, if you've got a website, then put it on your website and put it somewhere that's easily accessible, because as I said, it is a public document. Ask the question about, you know, have you demonstrated outcomes and impact? Is it very clear about the difference that you've made? And then in terms of, you know, planning it, who are you going to involve in putting the Trustees Annual Report together, and maybe have a clear timetable, so that you, you know, have enough time in your year to do it properly, as well as obviously meeting those 9-month or 10-month deadlines you've got with the regulators. When you get this, these slides, we have a sort of simple annual report template. There is also the one produced by the Charity Commission. The Charity Commission website also has some example Trustees Annual Reports and accounts for charities. So these will take you directly to those documents when you get them. And it did say there were going to be a couple of references. There is a document produced by a charity called Charity Comms about a year in the life, our guide to annual publications, which is very good, gives lots of ideas about actually content, how to jazz it up, thinking about your audiences. So it's a good reference document. The Charity Commission obviously has some advice, some guidance on doing your Trustees Annual Report and public benefit reporting. As I said, the sort of fundamental document is the charity SORP, so that's referenced. And then every year, CROWS, which is a national accountancy group, does quite a lot of work with charities. They do a good checklist. The checklist at the moment is a year old. I've checked yesterday, they still haven't updated it, so there might be a new one coming out pretty soon. But nothing's really changed in charity law in the last 12 months. So I think this checklist is still still correct. Okay, that's the end of my 45 minutes of talking at you. Has anyone got any questions? I will stop sharing.
Can I ask a fairly fundamental question?
Do that, yeah.
Well, I'll start from the premise of I'm the chair of the Dorset Family History Society, which is a charity.
Yeah.
But we have no employees. We do not, any funding is random donations, so on and so forth. What I can't understand is the difference between what we do, i.e. what we have in our constitution that we should do at the year of the physical year every year, which is an AGM where there are reports from the treasurer, from the chairman, from the secretary, which cover pretty much a lot of all the sort of activities where the reports are the financial report, the accounts are put in place and signed off by an auditor. So we have that stuff in place and we do it every year. I don't see where this fits in, especially as the Board of Trustees is the committee of the society.
Okay, so you're a registered charity?
We are.
Okay, so you must produce a trustees annual report, so whether you like it or not. So you might
We've
find...
never done it before. This is the issue.
Oh, okay. What's your turnover? What's your annual income roughly? It's probably quite small, is it?
Oh yeah, maybe a couple. I mean, this year we thought we were going to have to do something this year because we did get a donation from somebody's will, from somebody's estate.
Legacy, yeah.
But normally we're probably talking about, I haven't got the figures on the top of my head, but let's say £10,000.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you haven't got a file. You're not a CIO, are you? Probably not. You're probably quite old. You an older charity? Have you been around for quite a long time?
Pass. I don't know. What's a CIO?
A charitable incorporated organisation. I'm trying to work out whether you have to file your trustees annual report with the Charity Commission or not.
Well, that's the basic question, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because certainly in terms of what you've described as content, all that information becomes public information subsequent to our AGM every year.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, what I was going to say is that, yeah, you might just need to connect all those reports and things into one, if that makes sense. What I'll do, Merv, is I've got your email address from the. I'll just double check your status, and I'll probably get back to you and let you know.
That would be very useful,
okay.
Please, because as I say, I'm walking away from this rather more confused than I sat down.
Okay, right. Okay, sorry about that then.
That's not your fault.
Although actually, I always say sometimes people do go away with more questions than answers from this, because it's usually about highlighting what people have got go away to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'll get back to you once I've just checked your.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Julie's putting.
Apologies, but I am going to have to disappear now. But
okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Okay. Julie's asked about. Well, she's put in the chat. Would an example be one aimed at a main fund about the structure and boring stuff at the end? Yes, I think. So as I said, your trustees annual report will have to have certain things in it, but maybe you might pull out bits like just the story bit. For perhaps,
you just gave that example, didn't you? About you do your annual report and then you do
an impact report.
Report. So for our main funder who require sort of an annual report, it would just be pulling out those highlights.
I think you need to be clear though, because they sometimes might be expecting it to be your official trustees annual report and accounts.
No, it is one. They don't ask for our annual report. It is an update.
Okay, right.
So just a regular, they're given regular intervals of what they, so I guess it's more specific to their funding.
Yeah, than the organisation.
Just pulling that out from the annual report. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else got any questions? As my cat wanders across. Anybody got anything they want to ask?
Probably another, might sound a bit silly, but when you say about using Canva, so this is more of a kind of technical word, Canva. If you're kind of typing up your annual report on Word, can you pull it out of Canva onto that Word document?
Yeah. Well,
I've used Canva, but not.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, I think you can. I think you can create a graphic or whatever, and then it becomes
download it, and then
you can paste it into a Word document. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, because that's how infographics. Yeah, it must be true, because I know people who just produce an infographic and then they paste it into a Word document. So you must be able to do that. Okay, nobody else got any burning questions? All right. Can I ask you then to I've put in the chat box a link to a quick evaluation form. Could you do that for me? It should only take you a couple of minutes.
Mhm.
Hey, some people have finished. You're finishing off. So, anything else you want to ask me before you all go?
No, not for me.
Okay. Great. Well, okay. Well, as I said, you'll get a copy of the slides and a link to a recording of today. That should be probably done. If not tomorrow, it should be done early next week. Depends when Chris is working next. But hope you found today useful, and good luck with doing your next Trustee Annual Report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.